Is a Rolex watch really special? We're going to find out today as we explore watches so rare, so strange, and so far outside anything you'd find in a boutique, that most collectors will go their entire lives without seeing one in person. Let's wind. Number 5. The Rolex that went to Japan and never came back. I know. I am starting off with a Rolex, but before you click off, hear me out. Pick up any Rolex Explorer reference 1016, the black dial. The Arabic numerals at 3, 6, and 9. Clean, precise, quietly perfect. One of the best watch designs the 20th century produced. You know it without knowing you know it. Now picture the exact same watch. Identical case, identical movement, identical crown shape and handset. But with one thing changed. Where the dial says Explorer, it says Space Dweller. And somewhere between 10 and 13 examples of that watch are known to exist today. Here's the origin story the community mostly agrees on. In 1963, astronaut John Glenn completed his famous orbital flight and then toured Japan on a NASA Goodwill mission. The reception was extraordinary. Japanese crowds turned out in numbers that surprised even the Americans. The Mercury program was the most exciting story on the planet, and Glenn was its living symbol. Rolex smelled an opportunity. The story goes that they quietly produced a small batch of Explorer 1016s with Space Dweller on the dial, designed exclusively for the Japanese market to ride the wave of Mercury mania. It was a test run, cautious, limited, completely undocumented. If it captured the public's imagination, they'd expand. If it didn't, they'd quietly shelve it and move on. It didn't capture anything. Japanese buyers weren't impressed. The Space Dweller disappeared without fanfare, without a press release, and without a single mention in Rolex's official history. The company has never acknowledged it. You won't find it on their website. You can't find it in their archives. But things took a turn. The first Space Dweller ever appeared at public auction was in May 2002 at Sotheby's, Hong Kong, nearly 40 years after the alleged Japan launch. The pre-auction essay confidently stated the watch was introduced in 1963, then listed the auctioned example as being from circa 1961, 2 years before the supposed inspiration even happened. Sotheby's caught the discrepancy, but it sat in the public record. Since 2002, around 13 examples have surfaced with case numbers scattered across serial ranges, running from 1961 to 1967. Not clustered together, the way a genuine production batch would be. Then, in 2008, 4 unmounted Stern Freres dials turned up at Sotheby's. Just the dials. No watches. No documentation attached. Some researchers believe those loose dials are the key to everything. Their theory. Someone with knowledge of the vintage market found a supply of genuine, unissued Stern Freres dials in the early 2000s and used them to convert legitimate donor Explorers from the right era. It would explain why nothing surfaced at auction for 4 decades. It would explain the irregular serial clustering. It would explain why Rolex, an organization with serious archival capacity, has never confirmed a single example as factory original. Honestly, I'm not sure the case for authenticity is as solid as the community wants it to be. Something doesn't sit right about the 4-decade silence. But here's what makes the Space Dweller extraordinary, regardless of which version is true. Even in the skeptic's account, you'd need a genuine early 60s reference, 1016 as the donor watch, a genuine Stern Freres Space Dweller dial from a batch of apparently only 4 surviving examples, and the watchmaking skill to assemble it convincingly enough to pass expert examination. The result is still unlike anything else on Earth. And if the authenticators are right, if Rolex actually pressed a handful of Space Dweller dials for Japan in 1963 and nobody bought them, you're looking at one of the strangest, silent failures in the history of a brand not associated with failure. Either way, the collector who owns one owns a puzzle that may never be fully solved. Recent examples have crossed $190,000 at auction, up from $13,617 in 2002, 20 years, 14 times the value. All for a watch that Rolex doesn't acknowledge and the community can't stop arguing about. Picture the collector who bought the first one in 2002. They had $13,000, a story they half believed, and a watch nobody could fully confirm. 20 years later, the collector who holds one has an asset approaching $200,000 and a story that's grown more complicated with every passing auction. The mystery didn't hurt the value. It is the value. The authentication debate matters beyond the money. Because if the Space Dweller is genuine, it reveals something uncomfortable about Rolex. That one of them most controlled luxury brands in the world ran a quiet regional product test, failed, and never documented it. That kind of corporate embarrassment is exactly the thing that disappears from official histories. And if it's not genuine, the story is equally strange. Because in the 2000s, someone looked at a handful of unused Stern Freres dials in a storage lot, understood their potential, and built a mythology careful enough to fool serious auction houses repeatedly. Not once. Multiple times, with multiple watches, over multiple years. Neither version of this story belongs to a boring world. Which version of this story do you believe? Drop it in the comments. One watch with a disputed origin. The next one has a confirmed origin and a story so strange that Cartier hasn't fully explained it either, because the race it was designed for killed its founder before anyone else could ever win. Number 4. The Cartier that could only be won once. There's a principle in watchmaking that a great case should tell you what the watch is for. An Aquanaut belongs near water. A Royal Oak belongs on a yacht. A Santos belongs on a biplane. The Cartier Chaiche belongs in the Sahara, because the case is the Sahara. Cartier's creative director, Jacques Diltour, didn't draw inspiration from the desert head wrap worn by Tuareg men across the Sahara and Sahel. He sculpted the actual folds of that fabric into 18-karat gold. 3 colors: white, yellow, and rose, layered to suggest different planes of cloth catching the sun at different angles. Every curve follows the logic of wrapped material rather than the logic of a watch case. There are no conventional lugs. The leather strap passes invisibly through the back of the watch, the way fabric wraps the wrist. Nestled inside all of it, a small, rectangular Cartier dress dial with Roman numerals and a blue cabochon crown tucked into the sculpture like a single jewel resting in the sand. The collector community has argued about it ever since it surfaced. Beautiful or bizarre? Masterwork or museum piece that should never go on a wrist? The answer might be both, and that tension is part of what makes it so compelling. What makes the Chaiche unusual in Cartier's history is that most of their sculptural watches are abstractions. The crash is shaped by a melted hallucination. The pebble is shaped by a smooth stone. They evoke, they don't depict. The Chaiche actually depicts. It shows you the fabric. The folds are real. This is what that cloth looks like when someone with Diltour's skill and a serious budget decides to make it permanent in gold. In 1983, Cartier's CEO Alain Dominique Perrin approached Thierry Sabine, founder of the Paris-Dakar Rally, the brutal 6,000-mile race from France through Algeria, Niger, Mali, and Senegal. He made a proposition: win the rally twice in a row in the same vehicle category, and Cartier would commission a unique watch as the prize. Both men apparently considered it actually impossible. The challenge was built on that impossibility. It was meant to be a prize that would never be claimed, a gesture of extravagant seriousness about a race that was already claiming lives. They hadn't accounted for Gaston Rehir. The Belgian was 5 feet 5 inches of controlled focus on a motorcycle. Former triple motocross world champion. When he entered the Paris-Dakar motorcycle class in 1984 on a BMW R80 GS, he didn't just win, he controlled the race from start to finish. Then he came back in 1985 and did it again. The only competitor in the entire history of the challenge to ever meet its terms. Cartier had to actually make the watch. Rehir collected the Chaiche in 1985. A year later, Thierry Sabine was dead. His helicopter went down in a sandstorm during the 1986 race in Mali, killing 5 people, including Daniel Balavoine, one of the most popular singers in France at the time. The crash ended the Cartier challenge permanently. No one has ever claimed a second Chaiche, which makes the Rehir watch the only one ever actually awarded to anyone who earned it. The production numbers are contested across sources. The most consistent account puts the total at 4, the Rehir prize watch, a smaller diamond set version prepared in case a woman won the open category, one given to Sabine himself, and a reserve example held by Cartier. Sabine's is now believed permanently lost. The women's version and the reserve remain in the Cartier collection and don't travel to auction. So the Rehearsheikh is the only one a private collector has ever been able to buy. It sat with Rehear's family after his death in 2005, then disappeared into private hands. In September 2022, it reappeared at Sotheby's Paris. Pre-sale high estimate, €400,000. Hammer price, €1,003,000. More than double what the auction house expected. What nobody writes about when they cover the Cheich is what the watch represents at its deepest level. It's a trophy designed around an achievement both creators believed was impossible, won by someone who didn't share their assumptions, in a race whose organizer died before the story could repeat. There is no sequel. There is no other example in private hands. When a collector bought it for €1,000,000 in 2022, they weren't buying Cartier production history. They were buying the only surviving object from a specific moment that cannot be recreated, in a story that ended violently before it could continue. That's not provenance. That's something heavier. The Cheich was impossible to win twice. The next watch shouldn't exist at all. Patek Philippe has never officially explained it, and the auction world spent years arguing about whether it actually left the factory the way it looks. Number 3. The Patek without a moon. Every Patek Philippe, reference 3,448, has a moon phase at 6 o'clock. Every single one. The 3,448 was produced from 1962 to 1981. 586 examples across 19 years of production. Every watch that left the Patek workshops in Geneva during that period had the same feature at 6 o'clock, a small aperture showing the lunar cycle against a deep background disk. Except 7 of them don't. 7 known examples of the 3,448 exist without the moon phase aperture. No window. A clean, almost meditative dial where the moon should be. Collectors call them senza luna, Italian for without moon. They are the most discussed, most debated, and most thoroughly mythologized variants in 70s Patek collecting. And here's the core problem. Patek Philippe has never fully confirmed that any of them left the factory this way. The 3,448 mattered technically in a way that's easy to understate now. It was the first self-winding perpetual calendar wristwatch Patek Philippe ever produced, driven by the caliber 27 to 460Q, a movement with a free-sprung gyromax balance, an overcoil hairspring, and a beat rate of 2.75 Hz that was unusually rapid for the era. Other manufacturers spent years trying to match it. The case measured 37.5 millimeters, and it still looks completely proportional in 2026. One of those rare designs that doesn't age because it was never really of its moment. Of the 7 known Senza Luna examples, 3 are in white gold and 4 in yellow gold. Here's the detail that almost every catalog essay passes over. No 2 Senza Luna dials are exactly alike. The typography on the day subdial varies between examples. The date font shifts. The applied index sizing is inconsistent across all 7. Stern Frères, Patek's dial maker, appears to have treated each commission as a completely individual project rather than a small production batch, which makes the obvious question harder to dismiss. If these were factory errors or post-sale modifications, why does every single one of them look deliberately made? One of the 7 stands entirely apart from the others. Alan Banbury spent nearly 50 years at Patek Philippe as director of sales for English-speaking markets, helped Philippe Stern assemble the entire Patek Philippe museum collection, and wrote the authoritative book on the brand. His version of the 3,448 Senza Luna had the moon phase not just removed but replaced. Master watchmaker Max Burney built a new subdial at 6 o'clock showing a leap year indicator with a small red hand that no other 3,448 anywhere has. The modification is documented in the Patek archives as an official special commission. Henri Stern gifted the finished watch to Banbury in 1975 as recognition for his decades of work. Banbury sold it in 1999 to help finance a new home. At Sotheby's in 2008, it went for 1.84 million Swiss francs. At Christie's Hong Kong in 2021, the same watch sold for over $3.7 million. That red leap year hand at 6 o'clock commanded a significant premium above what a standard Senza Luna could have expected. The other 6 sit in more ambiguous territory. Some archive extracts explicitly note the moonless dial configuration. Some don't. One white gold example was withdrawn from auction in the early 2000s after Patek Philippe told the auction house the watch appeared to be genuine, but couldn't confirm whether it had originally left the factory in its current state. Genuine but unverifiable. Authentic to the brand, but not traceable to a specific production decision. For a company that maintains its own museum-grade archives, that's an almost uncomfortable answer to give. What the Senza Luna really represents: a Patek Philippe perpetual calendar that the company can't fully explain. Wearing a Patek movement, in a Patek case, on a Patek bracelet, doing something Patek didn't document. The most minimal perpetual calendar they ever made, achieved by leaving something out. The moon was there in the movement architecture. Someone removed it 7 times. And the brand, with all its records, can't tell you with certainty who authorized any of them or why. The perpendicular oddness of that, for a company with Patek's commitment to documentation, is precisely what makes this watch worth chasing across decades. There's a collector psychology at work here that's specific to the Senza Luna. Every other rare Patek can be explained with reference to production records, customer names, delivery dates, archive extracts. The story is complete. The Senza Luna refuses completion. It sits in the archive with a question mark attached, and the question mark is not a flaw. It's the entire point. Some collectors chase confirmation. They want provenance, documentation, and certainty. Others chase the gap. They want the thing that resists explanation, that forces you to sit with ambiguity. The Senza Luna is built for the second type of collector, and that type tends to have very deep pockets and very long patience. One detail worth sitting with: even the moon phase function isn't actually gone from most of these watches. The movement inside remains a standard 27 to 460 Q, with the moon phase complication still present in the gear train. The wheel is still there, turning through the lunar cycle in the dark, behind a dial that shows nothing. The moon is counting time. Nobody can see it. 7 times over, someone built that into a Patek Philippe and sold it to a client who apparently wanted exactly that. 7 watches missing their moon. The next one has something extra, a lug shape that appeared once in 1954 and was never repeated in 70 years. Number 2. The Patek with turtle flippers. Some watches wear their rarity loudly. The Patek Philippe, reference 2549 over 1J, wears it at the corners of the case, where most people wouldn't think to look. The 2549 is a 1954 yellow gold dress watch. 34 millimeters, manually wound caliber 23 to 300, a guilloche silver dial with applied indices, proportioned with the deliberate restraint that defined Patek's mid-century work. From the front, at distance, it reads as a beautiful 50s dress watch. Understated. Correct. Then you look at the lugs. They don't extend outward horizontally the way every other dress watch from this era does. They curve. They sweep away from the case downward and outward, splaying and tapering as they go, bending with a shape that reads as organic, almost alive. The collector community arrived at one description decades ago and hasn't moved from it: turtle flippers. Curved extensions that resemble the limbs of a sea turtle mid-stroke. Casemaker Markowski produced the case to specification. Whether the lug design was a bold, creative experiment or a one-time commission for a specific client, what matters is that Patek made this shape once and didn't do it again. Not in the following decade. Not in any subsequent catalog update. Not in any anniversary reissue. These lugs appeared in 1954 and disappeared. 8 total examples are believed to exist, not 8 survivors of a larger production run. Apparently, 8 is close to the full extent of it from the beginning. The piece appearing at Future Grail's May 2026 auction is one of these 8, and it carries a specific distinction within the group: a tropical dial. The original silver guilloche surface has shifted over 70 years to a warm, deep brown, the result of light exposure and the slow chemical transformation of dial materials at a rate nobody can predict or replicate. Tropical dial collecting is enormous within the vintage Rolex world, but the phenomenon appears anywhere the right conditions and the right materials meet enough time. No two tropical dials look alike. You can't manufacture this transformation. The chemistry ran on its own schedule across 7 decades and landed on this specific example. What's at auction is therefore a reference, with 8 known examples in the entire world, and within those 8, a single example that aged into something completely specific to itself. Previous examples of this reference have sold above $400,000. The tropical variant is expected to go beyond that. The 25491J keeps its secret quietly. Someone who doesn't follow vintage Patek closely could hold this watch, feel the case quality, appreciate the dial condition, and set it back down without realizing they just held one of 8. The flipper lugs are completely visible. They're right there, curving away from the case in plain sight. But they require knowing what you're looking at. Quick question for the community. If a dealer handed you this watch at a watch fair with 60 seconds to examine it, would you recognize the reference? That's the thing about the deepest layers of this hobby. The rarity isn't hidden. It's just written in a language that takes years to read. The question the 25491J raises for me is why Patek never revisited it. These lugs are extraordinary. They're completely unlike anything else in the catalog. They manage to be both technically precise and organically strange, which is an almost impossible combination in case design. And yet in 70 years, Patek hasn't touched them. No limited reissue. No tribute reference. The turtle flipper lug design sits in 1954 and stays there. Maybe that's exactly right. Maybe some things should only happen once. 8 watches with turtle flipper lugs. One man built a Rolex as a physical argument, brought it to Rolex, got turned down, and ended up redirecting an entire industry by accident. That watch is number 1, and it's going to auction soon. Before we move on to the next part, let me tell you this. Most people don't realize this, but buying a watch the wrong way can cost you thousands, and you won't even notice it until it's too late. You walk into a store or browse online, and everything looks the same, but behind the scenes, there's a system. Prices aren't always fair, availability is controlled, and one bad decision can leave you overpaying for something that doesn't even hold its value. That's why I created a complete free insider guide to buying watches. Inside, you'll find the best watches to buy, the watches to avoid, and how to choose a watch that actually fits your style and budget long term. The goal is simple. I'll help you stop guessing and start buying smart. You'll find the free guide in the pinned comment and description. Now, let's move on to the next part. Number 1. The Rolex with the heart Rolex didn't want. Let me start with the escapement. Everything else follows from it. Every mechanical watch runs on a device called an escapement. Its job is to release the mainspring's stored energy in controlled, equal steps, giving each tick the same duration as the last. The escapement is what makes timekeeping possible. For 250 years, from Thomas Mudge's invention in 1775 until nearly the end of the 20th century, the overwhelming majority of mechanical watches used the same fundamental design: the Swiss lever escapement. It worked. Nobody improved it. George Daniels improved it. Daniels grew up in difficult circumstances in East London, taught himself watchmaking from secondhand books, and built one of the most extraordinary technical careers the craft has produced in the modern era. He made 37 watches across his entire working life. 37. Across decades. His Space Traveler pocket watch sold for £3.2 million at Sotheby's in 2019. He wrote the standard textbook on watchmaking technique, still in use in horological schools today. He trained Roger Smith, who continues Daniels' methods from a studio on the Isle of Man. He did more to advance mechanical watchmaking in the 20th century than any single person working inside Switzerland. But he's most remembered for the coaxial escapement, patented in 1980. The technical principle is straightforward once you understand what it solves. The conventional Swiss lever escapement works through sliding friction. The pallet stones slide against the teeth of the escape wheel to release energy in steps. That sliding generates heat and wear, which requires lubrication, which degrades over time, which is why mechanical watches need periodic servicing to stay accurate. Daniels designed a system using 3 pallets that push rather than slide. Near frictionless contact, longer service intervals, better long-term accuracy, a fundamental reduction in the mechanism's internal wear. He brought this idea to every major Swiss manufacturer he could reach. Patek Philippe, IWC. Others. The answer was consistently no. The meetings went the same way. Polite attention, genuine technical interest from the watchmakers in the room, then a corporate decision that said the investment wasn't justified. The Swiss industry had built its entire servicing model around the lever escapement. Every watchmaker trained to maintain it. Every part's supply chain running around it. Changing the escapement wasn't just a technical decision, it was a structural one, and the industry wasn't ready. The Swiss industry had run the same escapement architecture for 2 centuries. The manufacturing infrastructure was built around it. The service industry was built around it. Why rebuild the engine when the car is selling? So Daniels built the argument in a form no manufacturer could dismiss. He took a standard Rolex Datejust, reference 16220, stainless steel, circa 1988, a watch anyone could walk into a boutique and buy without a waitlist or a relationship, and modified it himself to house a working coaxial escapement. The logic was specific and intentional. If the coaxial could fit into an existing production-sized case using a modified version of a standard movement architecture, the argument that it was too complex to implement at production scale had nowhere left to stand. He brought the modified Datejust to Rolex. They looked at it and passed. That decision handed one of the most significant mechanical innovations in modern watchmaking directly to Omega. Nicholas Hayek introduced the first production coaxial watch in 1999. Today, the coaxial drives nearly every mechanical Omega on the market, hundreds of thousands of watches per year, across multiple collections, all running on technology that Rolex physically held and walked away from, the caliber 2000, 500, and its successors. More than 25 years of production, one of the most consequential technical decisions in Swiss watchmaking since the quartz crisis. And it traces back to a rejection in a meeting where Daniel set a stainless Datejust on a table, opened the case back, and heard the word no. The watch looks completely ordinary. 36 millimeters, fluted bezel, Jubilee bracelet, date window at 3. Nothing on the outside signals anything unusual. Set it next to 10 standard reference 16220S from the same era, and you'd have to know exactly what you were looking for to pick the right one. What's inside is the only coaxial escapement George Daniels ever fitted into a Rolex. After Daniels died in 2011, Roger Smith found the watch while reconstituting the contents of Daniels' Riversdale workshop into a museum. Smith had known about the modification, but hadn't seen the watch in some time. It was in the workshop, still running. It appeared at Sotheby's in November 2012. Lot 21 inches, the sale of Daniels' estate. Pre-sale estimate, £5,000 to £7,000. It sold for £21,250. The auction notes described it accurately and without drama. The watch used to demonstrate that coaxial technology could be scaled to fit a standard production wristwatch movement. This week, that same watch is Lot 33 at Future Grail's May 2026 auction in Singapore. Coming from Daniel's personal collection, the estimate is considerably higher than £21,000. What I keep returning to is the specific texture of the failure this watch carries. Daniels spent years making the coaxial argument through every available channel. Papers, demonstrations, his own handmade watches at meetings. Every appointment he could get in front of a manufacturer's technical team. Then he built the argument into a physical object, a working example in a standard production case. Open the back. Look at it. It fits. It works. This is possible. You can do this. And Rolex, having physically examined it, said no. So, the watch that exists now is an object that served its original purpose and failed to achieve it. An instrument of persuasion that didn't persuade the person it was built for. Something built specifically to change a mind that failed to change that specific mind. But because it failed, because Rolex declined, because Daniels kept going until Omega said yes, this plain stainless Datejust is more historically significant than any standard Rolex production piece from the same era. Every Omega with a coaxial escapement traces back in some direct causal line through the rejection captured inside this watch. Hundreds of thousands of watches, decades of production, an industry-level technical shift, all from a no. And consider what that no actually cost Rolex. Not just the licensing revenue, though that would have been substantial across 2 decades of Omega production. The deeper cost is identity. Every Omega with a coaxial escapement is carrying a story that could have been Rolex's story. The brand that pioneered the most significant escapement improvement in 250 years. The brand that bet on a rejected Englishman's idea and built an industry argument around it. Instead, that story belongs entirely to Omega. It gets told in every press release, every Seamaster advertisement, every boutique conversation about mechanical innovation. Rolex passed on the chance to own that narrative for good. If you ever see that watch opened, if you ever look at the movement inside, you're not looking at a watch. You're looking at the moment the industry missed. So, that is it. 5 watches and 5 completely different reasons they shouldn't exist the way they do. A Rolex whose authenticity the community has debated for 20 years without resolution. A Cartier trophy so bound to a tragedy that it could only be awarded once and will never be awarded again. A Patek perpetual calendar missing its defining complication, made by a company that can't fully explain why. 8 watches with organic flipper lugs, made once in 1954 and never repeated in 70 years. And a plain stainless Datejust carrying a rejection that accidentally redirected the Swiss watch industry. The pattern across all 5 is the same. Something went sideways at the moment of creation. A decision reversed. A challenge met. A pitch refused. A moon phase removed. And the watch absorbed that moment, kept it. The watch is worth what it is not because of what it looks like, but because of what it's been carrying ever since. The rarest objects in watch collecting aren't always the most expensive ones. They're the ones where something specific and unrepeatable happened, and the watch is the only evidence that it did. Think about that for a second. A standard Rolex Datejust from 1988 sells for a few $1,000s on any gray market platform right now. The exact same reference, with the exact same exterior, carrying the moment George Daniels' biggest idea got rejected by the company it was designed for, is worth dramatically more. The object didn't change. The story attached to it did. That's the only difference. Watches tell time on the outside. They carry stories on the inside. The best ones carry both. If you've ever held a vintage piece and felt something you couldn't quite explain, drop the reference below. And if you want to follow this channel, like this video and subscribe for more.